We got the phone call and heard the word Homocystinuria. I had been at a Mother's Day event with my mom and my sister and sister-in-law. And on the drive home, Ryan called me and he's like, "Are you coming home soon? I'm actually getting in the car right now." It's like, "Okay, the pediatrician called. He'd like to talk to us both." And, this is the weekend. So it was one of those feelings that I thought something is going to change really big right now. And he called us and he said that the most recent blood work had come back. And we finally have what he believes is the answer. And he was able to say, "We think this is homocystinuria."
Hello, my friends. I'm so happy to be with you today. My name is Katie Taylor. I am a certified child life specialist and the host of the Child Life On Call podcast. This is the place where we listen to parents' stories about navigating their child's healthcare experiences, from diagnosed to children's hospital and everything in between. Each episode helps us better understand what families go through and how we can show up with more compassion and advocacy and support. Today, you'll get to hear from Melanie. She is a mom to now 12-year-old boy from Vancouver, British Columbia. Mason was diagnosed with homocystinuria, or HCU, a rare genetic metabolic disorder that affects how the body can process certain proteins. What makes Melanie's story so powerful is not from how the diagnosis came about, it's not from a specific hospital visit, but from a routine eye exam when Mason was just 7 years old. Melanie shares how an observant optometrist noticed something unusual in Mason's eye and referred her to the pediatrician, the first step that was uncovering a condition that most doctors never even encounter. She describes the long process of testing and waiting for answers and finally hearing the word HCU on Mother's Day of 2021. From there, she and her husband, Ryan, learned how to manage a very low protein diet, daily metabolic formula, and multiple medical appointments, all the while trying to help their son stay active and social and confident. We talk about how Melanie approached explaining the diagnosis to Mason in an age-appropriate way and an empowering way, and how she managed resilience without sacrificing her own well-being, including a story about eating prawns in the pantry, and I just want to apologize in advance for what I say about prawns. She also talks about how her family has connected with others through the HCU network, America, CAN PKU Canada. She's even become a voice for newborn screening advocacy, working to ensure more babies are tested accurately at birth so families like hers can get the right care sooner. As you listen, you're going to hear how Melanie is persistent, aware, and how she has a balance. It's not that it was always easy. In fact, it's still really challenging. And it's a reminder that the most important clues in our child's health can come from routine, everyday appointments. And that the way we communicate with kids during hard times can actually set the tone for their lifelong coping. Let's dive into our conversation with Melanie.
I am Melanie. I'm mom to 12-year-old Mason. I have a husband, Ryan. Mason is our only child. We call ourselves one and done. We're very happy with our one. And we come from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada.
So beautiful. I was just telling Melanie before we started recording that my family and I went to Vancouver and we went to Whistler. And I was just chatting with my daughter about how much we loved that trip. But I was telling her, I said, that's not a trip we can go on every year. Like, it's costly to fly across the United States and like go stay in another country. Oh, she had a quarter and she threw it in like a wishing well or something. And she threw it in and she goes, "Do you want to know what I wish for?" And I was like, "No, that's your like special secret or whatever you wish. And you can tell me if you want, but it can be just private to you." She goes, "I just wish we had enough money to go back to Canada this year."
I love that.
So are you an outdoorsy family? What's it like living there?
A little bit. Mason is a sports kid. He loves all athletics, but mostly a hockey player, which is kind of an indoor sport. But we actually were also just in Whistler. We went a few weeks back for a little trip this summer, and it's beautiful in the summer and it's beautiful in the winter and it's beautiful anytime. And we do
Yeah.
going there as well. It's only
And
about a
it's
2-hour drive for us, so
and it's the most beautiful drive in the history of the world.
it's really nice. I know. I agree.
Yeah. Well, I love that he's a hockey player. That's very Canada.
You're right. It is.
Our Canada child life specialists who listen to this podcast are like, yes.
There you go.
And our Canada parents. Well, walk us through, if you would, to I know he was diagnosed a little bit later in early childhood. Talk to us kind of about what you were noticing, what signs and symptoms, and what led you to believe that something was going on.
So Mason was diagnosed at age 8, and we started getting an inkling that something was going on when he was still 7, so a few months before his 8th birthday. And we really didn't see anything alarming. It was because we were at a routine eye doctor's appointment. Mason had been wearing glasses for a few years, starting in kindergarten, nothing crazy, just your typical needs glasses when he was starting school. So we'd see the eye doctor, every 6 months, sort of thing. And it was just a regular appointment. My husband stayed home that morning. I took him to the doctor expecting the usual type of appointment. And suddenly, during sort of towards the end, he asked Mason to leave the room. Luckily, Mason's a really social kid. He was happy to go out and chat with the ladies and look at glasses and things like that. So I stayed back, and I remember very clearly my heart was just racing. I knew something was off. I could just sense it. And he immediately started asking me questions about Mason's health. And he didn't have a specific diagnosis that he shared in the moment, but he told me that he was going to send a letter to our pediatrician because he had some concerns about what he saw in Mason's eyes. He didn't really give me much else. And as much as I wanted to know, I was also terrified to know. So I left with Mason and followed up with our pediatrician before he even called me. And that's when he said he would run some more blood work, and they suspected it was some sort of a connective tissue disorder, but they didn't say that it was homocystinuria, which is what Mason has, HCU for short. We call it that. Um, because they had to run more tests to find out. It's so extremely rare that most doctors haven't even heard of it.
Wow. I'm thinking like you're probably grateful to this
Yeah.
optometrist who was able to see something that was going on. And isn't it interesting how you both want to know what's happening and get a diagnosis and figure it out, but also don't want it to happen and don't want a diagnosis and don't want to have to figure out. And you can like live in these two worlds
It was
simultaneously.
terrifying. Yeah. I was started Googling things, which is never really the best idea.
I know, but
Um,
they don't Google, and it's like, I have to Google. How can you not
yeah.
Google? And now we chat
Yeah.
GPT everything.
Yeah. And that was actually before then. So
Yeah,
I couldn't
yeah,
even do that.
yeah,
But we did, and some pretty terrifying things popped up, which at that point I really did kind of get into the I need to know now mode.
yeah.
It became kind of instant, and I became that parent that just kept calling, like, hurry up, tell me what to do next. You need blood work? We'll go today. What do you need us to do to get the diagnosis? And things don't really move really quickly, especially when the doctors aren't really sure what they're looking at.
How did you and your husband kind of balance that role of figuring out what was going on, how to get to the next appointment, and finally get the answers?
So we decided to keep it to ourselves at that point, even though we have extremely supportive friends and family. They're the best. But because we were so scared and had no answers, we just couldn't fathom trying to tell other people who love Mason so much what was going on and have them have the same feeling that we had at that time. We didn't want to do that to them. And we also didn't want to be asked for updates that we just didn't have yet. We
Ah,
pictured ourselves going into it, sharing with our close family and friends when we had real answers. So we opted to just lean on each other. And, it was also during the height of COVID. It was 2021, spring of 2021. So we weren't really seeing people much either. So it made it a little
yeah.
bit easier. That was February at that eye doctor's appointment. We got the phone call and heard the word homocystinuria. It was actually on Mother's Day in May. I had been at a Mother's Day event with my mom and my sister and sister-in-law. And on the drive home, Ryan called me and he's like, "Are you coming home soon?" I said, "Yeah, I'm actually getting in the car right now." He's like, "Okay, the pediatrician called. He'd like to talk to us both. And, this is the weekend." So it was one of those feelings that I thought something is going to change really big right now. So I raced home. He set Mason up with a movie and some snacks or something like that. And he called us and he said that the most recent blood work had come back, and we finally have what he believes is the answer. And he was able to say, "We think this is homocystinuria." He was honest and admitted that he then had to kind of go look it up and
Yeah.
see what it was all about. And he told us then that he would now be referring us to our children's hospital. We're lucky we live in British Columbia. We have a wonderful BC Children's Hospital here. So he referred us to the metabolic team at BC Children's, and he said they will call you on Monday. But he did say, if this is what this is, it's treatable. And that's something that really stuck with us because we knew it was scary, we knew it was big, and it was going to be a big change of some sort. He did mention the low protein diet, but to us, we just thought, oh, okay, maybe he just doesn't get to eat meat anymore. This sounds easy. We tried to look on the bright side. We actually didn't Google it, if you can believe that. We thought, okay, they're going to call us tomorrow or whichever day. Let's just wait and hear from the professionals and let's not go down this rabbit hole. We'd already been in such a deep rabbit hole as it was. It was just too much to do to ourselves. And we actually felt a little better in that moment. And I didn't want it to change. So I said, okay, let's see what the doctors say when they call and we will go from there.
What did you learn in that next call with the doctors? And can you help explain a little bit about what HCU is?
Yes. So we had never heard of it, and most people probably never will have heard of it. It's actually tested for at birth at the newborn screening when they prick your baby's heel. I remember Mason getting that test, and you kind of you leave, and if they don't have any news, you think that's good news. And I was, I guess, somewhat naive in the sense that I didn't think that a mistake or an error could possibly be made. It wasn't a mistake. The test, unfortunately, only picks up about 50% of babies. It's just the way that the test is. It's a science of the test at the moment. Things are being worked on to improve this test. Mason happened to fall into that 50%. So that's sort of the newborn screening side of things. He was tested. What they explained to us about HCU is that it is a genetic metabolic condition. So each parent has to carry that gene. Your baby would then have a 25% chance of having the disorder. So what it is that when you feed your baby or any person that has this disorder eats proteins from food, it affects their homocysteine levels. The methionine in the protein raises the homocysteine levels. And when your homocysteine levels get high, you can have a whole host of problems. So homocystinuria can affect your eyes, which is what ended up happening with Mason, and I can touch on that more about what happened there. But it can also affect your bones, your brain, as far as your developmental stages go. It can also cause blood clots, deep vein thrombosis, and strokes. So it can be very, very serious when it's untreated. Mason's, of course, was his eyes. But what they explained to us is in order to treat it, you have to be on a very low protein diet. In order to distinguish what that looks like, you have to get a whole sort of workup done and kind of experiment a little bit with eating food and protein and then test the blood again. And then you will come to sort of a baseline of what's best for you. There's also, some people will say, well, if your child's not eating hardly any protein, well, that's not healthy. And you're right, it's not healthy. We're lucky to live in a time where metabolic formula is a thing. And as grateful as we are for the metabolic formula, believe me, we are. Unfortunately, it tastes terrible. So on top of having to tell our 8-year-old that all his favorite foods are now out of the picture, he also has to drink this really nasty drink every single day, multiple times a day for the rest of his life, most likely. Those were the sort of immediate treatment plans that they explained to us. And then when we went into the hospital, we sat down for hours. We were there for about 6 hours, and we went over all of the details of what that actually.
Thank you for explaining that in a way that we can understand. Again, I keep going back to this ophthalmologist that he said something and kind of sounded the alarms. It's like so important for preventative care to go and do these routine things. I can imagine that Mason is an active 8-year-old, knowing that now he plays hockey. How did you disclose the diagnosis to him? Was it one conversation? Was it a lot of conversations, or what did that look like?
Yeah, he was only 8 at the time, so it's a little different than how we talk about it with him now that he's 12. So we kind of did it step by step, sort of need to know basis. So when he had to be at an appointment, especially that one at BC Children's, so that one, we really had to kind of prepare him for that and say, this is why we're going, because the eye doctor found something happening in your eyes, and we want to make sure that the problem doesn't get worse. So we're going to go and find out what we can do to keep you healthy. And we did tell him that we knew they were going to tell us a little bit about what protein does to your body, Mason, to your body, and why you might have to eat less of it, and what kind of foods we're going to be able to try, and maybe get some new types of foods and new types of treats in the house that maybe you didn't get before. We did tell him straight up about the formula as well, that there's going to be a special drink that you'll have to drink in order to keep your body really healthy. We really leaned on the importance of how mom and dad do certain things to stay healthy because we know what our bodies need. And we're really lucky that we now know what your body needs because we can do the right things to keep you strong and healthy. I would then drink when we started the formula. I would mix up, my greens drink or something like that while he was
Yeah.
drinking his formula. And I would just remind him that I didn't really like it either. It wasn't my favorite drink, but I knew my body really needed this stuff and it's going to keep me strong. It's going to keep me healthy. And I would sit there and I would drink with him. And I have to be honest, he was such a champ. I don't know how. Some people ask, well, how did you get him to drink it? And I don't know. I feel like we tried our best to explain it to him in the most age appropriate way. And this is no shame on any child who struggles more because I really think it's an independent thing
Right.
per person, really. And he drank it. So, and we tried to explain it to him that way when he was old.
Melanie, you're such an amazing mom. It would have been, been so easy and understandable at every stage of that appointment to just be overwhelmed and not know what to say. I'm sure it wasn't all perfect, right? And that there were ups
I
and
was that
downs.
too, I promise.
Yeah, right. But what you're doing is by sharing how you talked to Mason, you're giving this like very simple, reasonable explanation to something that is so complex,
Yeah.
right? But you're able to break it down in a way that he can understand. And then you can't control his response to it, and you can help guide him and say you'll be there with him as you explain it. But you did an amazing job.
Well, thank you.
Oh my gosh, of course. He's very lucky to have you. I can imagine.
100%.
And the other thing I wanna pull out is, like, this kind of we're in it together feeling that you did, but it wasn't at the expense of your health. Sometimes I can see parents coming in and not wanting to eat because their child has to be no food by mouth before a surgery, and they're in solidarity with them and saying, "Well, if they can't eat, I'm not gonna eat." And I so often try to stress to parents that, like, "Actually, I really need you at the top of your game. Like, let's find another way to relate to what he's going through. Maybe you can put on a gown or what can we do to make you relate? But I want you to take care of you." And Melanie, what you did is you continued to take care of your health and mirrored what you wanted him to do and see, but it wasn't at your expense, which is like, we need Melanie at the top of her game right now.
Yes. And the doctor and the dietitian, that's who we met with at the hospital, to the doctor as well as a dietitian. The dietitian really helps the diet side of things, of course. She was pretty adamant to both Ryan and I, you're gonna maybe not want to eat the same things anymore because you're going to want to eat like him to make him feel more comfortable. And that's understandable, of course. But you have to remember that you two still need to eat protein. You guys still have to take care of yourselves in that way. And his body does not need that. So I took that as and it wasn't immediate. It took me a bit. I
Yeah.
shared this story a few times about how I would eat prawns in the pantry.
Okay, wait, for our US American people, what are prawns?
Oh, shrimp? Did that
Okay,
shrimp?
shrimp. Yeah, yeah, shrimp. Yeah.
I guess prawns are just like bigger shrimp. I don't know.
Okay, good. Maybe I'm just not a fish person. It's not even a Canada, US thing. I just have no
That's
idea.
okay. It's really called both, but I think, yeah, the ones we bought were prawns.
So
Mason was
funny.
such
Okay.
a good eater. He loved fish. He loved all types of meat and eggs, and he ate all the protein. And prawns was kind of our thing because Ryan doesn't really
Yeah.
like seafood. And at some point, I had them in the freezer, and I was going to eat them, but I didn't want him to see me eating them. So I made us a rice and veggie dish, and then I quickly ate some prawns in the pantry. And I felt good about that at the time. I'm like, yes, he does not need to see this. This is so unfair. And
Yeah.
I think at the time it was actually probably the right thing to do. It was earlier on
Yeah.
in the diagnosis. However, I didn't, I learned after some time that doing that wasn't doing him any favors because the reality of the situation is that nobody else is going to eat prawns in the pantry. I needed to sit with him and eat prawns in front of him, and Ryan needed to sit with him and eat eggs in front of him. As much as it breaks our hearts, and it broke our hearts, we had to sit with him in that discomfort and be there for him and say, I know this is really hard, and just let him feel it, honestly. Not easy. I didn't like doing it. But I don't think that doing the opposite would have done him any favors, because as he grows older and is around people eating these foods, he's going to have sort of that tool in his toolbox of building that resilience and understanding why and being okay with it as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, and you can do it with compassion and say, I know this is really hard,
Yeah.
and
Well,
you're not rubbing it in his face like mom and dad get prawns.
no,
And
no,
yeah, it's like, so you may think, like you said, the building resilience part is hard, and not everything is going to work forever, as you know. So at the beginning, it worked to eat in the closet. And then the next thing you know, it worked to a little bit at a time, bring it up. And now you're in a different place. And so things evolve and change, and it's not always going to be this way.
for sure. Yeah.
So he received the diagnosis. You guys have the treatment plan. He has to do the drink. What are some of the things that helped you during that process? Were you able to connect with another parent in the area or online or somewhere that you were seeing share their story or experience that you were able to learn from?
So I was very open to that right off the bat. I understand that not everybody would be, but I told our dietitian in that very first meeting, I need to talk to somebody else, like almost panicking, like who else is doing this right now? Of course,
Yeah.
we never heard of it. We've never heard of such a diet. And she said, okay, I can see if there's anybody who wants to reach out. The unfortunate part is that it is so rare. They don't treat just HCU. They treat a few other metabolic disorders, some that are a little bit more common while still rare. So even if there's a family or two that they're treating, they might not be overly interested, and that's okay. So right off the bat, I didn't hear from anybody in our own area, but I got online pretty quickly and discovered a group on Facebook. Just joined up. It was a group in the States, and that really helped me sort of ask questions within the group about how people do things. It connected me to the opportunity to join in certain Zoom sessions that these groups would hold, even if it had nothing to do with the topic, may have had nothing to do with me. I recall, for example, one was about arranging meals for your child for back to school at their school. And, here where we are, we send our own food to school always. So that wasn't really a
Right.
topic for me, but I didn't care. I just jumped into the Zoom session and just listened to people talk. And I knew
Yeah.
either they had HCU or their children had it. And that was enough for me. And I think that for us and for myself personally, connecting with other people was really, really important. I needed to see somebody doing well. I needed to see somebody with a positive experience and even share some of the harder experiences to prep me a little bit. That was honestly what got me through the first little while, even though I had, again, I'll say it again, that extremely supportive family. Being associated and around people that fully understood what was happening made a really big difference for me.
Has Mason had the opportunity to meet or talk with another child that has the diagnosis?
Yeah. So that's the best part is HCU Network America. That's the group I joined up with on Facebook. Is a phenomenal organization in the States, and they do host conferences every 2 years. This was 2021 when Mason was diagnosed, and they had their next one coming up in the summer of 2022. So we went to Bethesda, Maryland, and we went to the conference and we met so many families and like some that are very, very close friends to this day, and will be. And we went to a further conference in 2024, 2 years later. Um, got to do the same thing all over again. And actually, just yesterday, Mason and I got back from a conference in Calgary, Alberta, here in Canada. That's with a group called Can PKU Plus. They are a group that started with the metabolic disorder called PKU, similar treatment plan to HCU, but they've branched out to include their allied disorders, which includes HCU. And we were able to be within a really big group of people that all understand the diet and the lifestyle and the formula and the challenges that come with having this type of metabolic disorder. And even though Mason doesn't enjoy the conference side of things, the presentations and that, it didn't matter. He was there for the socialization part of it, and he loved it. He had a great time. And I was actually able to present on newborn screening and our story of being missed at birth. And that was a really positive experience for me. And I got a lot of really wonderful feedback. And I think it's going to help spread some awareness about what needs to be done with this test and the fact that it actually needs to be tested for in a few provinces in Canada that aren't testing for it at all.
What does it feel like to be a part of the change for future kids?
Well, slow. It's a slow process to create any sort of change, but worth it. Think about when we found out that Mason was missed at birth. The diagnosis is one thing, but knowing that, oh my gosh, we could have prevented the damage to his eyes. We could have prevented him having to find himself at 8, and he never would have even had a bite of meat before, or all the other protein foods. It's not just meat, there's protein in everything, almost everything. So I look back to that feeling and wish something different had happened, right? I wish that he had that positive test at birth. Or think about the provinces where they're missing 100% of the babies because they aren't testing for it at all. That is not okay. I really, really want to see a change. And if I can be the change, fantastic. It can be because what happened to us, other people aren't going to experience that absolute devastation of realizing you could have prevented these health complications. Some people's experiences with their children can be and have been much worse. And to know that this can be prevented when you find out at birth, it's such a powerful thing as a parent, as terrifying as it is, to be able to start treating them right off the bat. It's a game changer.
Absolutely. I can imagine that that was a process to move through grief and anger, and those things probably still come up at times.
Yeah.
It's so good what I love is the balance of the ways that you're presenting things, because in the age of social media, it's so easy for us to get on and compare, even in the medical parent world, of how they organize and blend their this or that, or are able to do it. And we're kind of seeing the highlight reel. And being a
Yeah.
part of the change and advocacy groups is really incredible, but it doesn't come without a cost of it being slow and questioning if you're doing the right thing and are you doing enough and all of it that comes around it.
Absolutely.
So I would love if you could kind of walk us through. So you had mentioned that he got glasses kind of early on in kindergarten and was just doing his routine ophthalmologist appointments. What ended up happening with his eyes?
Right. So with his eyes, shortly after the diagnosis, we were seeing an eye specialist because just our regular optometrist knew he needed to see somebody a little bit more specialized. It was a pediatric ophthalmologist. And we were seeing him quite regularly because what happens with HCU with the eyes is the lenses in our eyes will start to shake. And what can happen is they can end up detaching, which is very scary and an emergency situation. So you don't want it to get to that point. The shaking in the lenses is what really gave us the diagnosis. They aren't quick to just jump on surgery right away if it's not required. But it only took a few months for us to be back at the specialist for him to say, you know what, we're not going to take any more chances here. He needs to get these lenses removed because then it's safe. He now, if he bumps his head or he, falls in hockey or something like that, he's an active kid, they're not just going to detach. We don't want that to happen. So what happens is they do surgery on the eyes one at a time. So we had to go for one eye surgery. And then 2 weeks later, we had to go for another eye surgery.
That's really back to back.
It really is. And, it's painful and it's scary. And to have to do it once and get through it and realize that you're just doing this again in 2 weeks and have to tell him that too. Yes, we know this was scary and hard and painful. We're heading back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Not easy. And this goes back to the diagnosis at birth. It's just so key. This likely would never have happened to his eyes had he been treated from birth. So we did the 2 surgeries and he did well. Everything went successfully. And I'm so grateful we did the surgeries because now we don't have that risk anymore. But what happens is he can only, without his special contact lenses in, he really kind of sees like we would see underwater. So he has a special pair of contact lenses that he wears every single day. They make him see wonderfully. So we're very lucky because now he can see great. And not having to wear glasses during sports is a little easier for him anyway.
Yeah.
So there's the bonus in that. When he's older and fully grown, he can choose to have surgery where they actually do lens replacement. And then he won't need the contacts anymore. So that'll be up to him once he's an adult and we see what he chooses to do. But it's nice to know that that option will be there for him. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, I'm kind of thinking about what your experience was like and that he was tested for it, but it didn't show up or he wasn't tested for it, that 50%. What can parents do if they want to make sure their child was tested for this? How does that conversation go with the doctor?
Yeah, I understand that concern in listening to this because everyone's thinking, well, my baby was tested at birth. What if something was missed? And I don't want to, spread fear. This isn't a
Yeah.
rare situation. The thing about the HCU test is that no one's making a mistake. It's just that the test, they haven't been able to come up with a test that works well enough yet with that first blood spot screening. So HCU can show up in so many different ways, and it's a slow burn. So Mason didn't show signs of HCU really at all. We can kind of look back on his history and say, okay, sure, he walked a little later. He crawled a little later. His speech was maybe slightly delayed, but it was nothing extreme. And he always caught up to where he needed to be. So there's no doctor on the planet that's going to say, oh, this child must have Homocystinuria. It's not going to happen. However, if you're listening to this, and maybe some of these things are happening, it doesn't hurt to ask for an amino acid screening. It doesn't hurt to go in and say, hey, I was listening to this podcast. Can we just test for this, please?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing other tests anyways, it's just a blood draw for test their homocysteine and their methionine. At birth, there's not a lot you can do unless you ask to have your baby's blood drawn again in a couple of weeks or months and see if their homocysteine levels are high. You can certainly ask for that.
Yeah. That's helpful to know, even just asking for an amino acids test if something's
Yeah, there's
and
so many reasons why kids, might fall behind and then catch up. And it certainly doesn't mean that they have homocystinuria, but it doesn't hurt to ask if maybe you're in that sort of cycle of trying to figure out what's happening with your child. Sure, add that to the list to check. Get it
yeah.
off the list, eliminate it, hopefully, or find out. You never know.
And it always comes back to, I think, finding and shopping around for a pediatrician and a care team or an ophthalmologist or whoever the specialist is that you're seeing that you trust and can bring these things to without judgment. Like you said, we're not trying to spread fear, but trying to spread awareness, which is really important. And I think there is a difference. If you have that trusting relationship with your pediatrician, not only can you bring things to them, but then you can often receive. They're taking care, if they thought it was an issue, they would ask for the test too. So there has to be that mutual trust together.
For sure. And then the thing about HCU, as I mentioned, many doctors haven't heard of it, so they're not going to think about it.
Yeah.
So I would never have thought to ask for this because I had never heard about it, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. But I'm hopeful that the newborn screening is going to improve over time and that more babies will get diagnosed at birth. That's what I hope.
I would love to know some of your favorite parts about being Mason's mom and what you love so much about him.
Wow. I was talking to someone at the conference and they made a really great point of how, this disorder doesn't define your child, and so much about them and their disorder, but like a million other things about them too that have nothing to do with that. So I think for me, I've learned a lot about him through finding out about the disorder. Of course, his resilience is astounding. I also worry about his resilience because I don't like that he has to be so resilient. So it's finding that balance of, yes, I'm so proud of you for being resilient, but it's okay if some days you're not so resilient too. And you can say that this sucks and I'm
Yeah.
annoyed that I can't have that, and I'm frustrated that I have to drink this. So we try to keep that balance with him. But I think, and a lot of people who know him would agree, I think innately he really is just a positive kid. I think that's just part of his personality. So I'm grateful for that. His ability to try new things and do new things, he isn't afraid to start a new sport. Like he tried this summer, like, I just want to play flag football. I'm like, okay, well, you've never played that before and you're 12, but sure. So we
Yeah.
signed him up for that. And, he had a blast, and he doesn't really, yeah, he doesn't mind that he maybe didn't know everything about it and wasn't going to be the best one on the team or anything like that. But off he went and he had a ton of fun. I love being a sports mom. I love being a hockey mom. I really enjoy seeing him, create these relationships with kids on a team, lose together, win together, encourage his teammates. And he's not always the best loser either. So, teaching him that sort of sportsmanship type
Yes.
of behavior, connecting with other parents about sports and being a hockey mom with other hockey moms. It's a really fun thing for us. I would say his sense of humor, he's really sarcastic. He finds the humor in almost everything. He loves to make people laugh.
Yeah.
To me, what could be better?
I love that. Then you just get to be laugh at his jokes all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And some of them are really funny.
I'm having this revelation, and I ask this question at the end of a lot of my interviews is what do you love the most? It's so hard to put the most. That's not what I mean. What do you love about being your mom? And it's like this little snippet into who Mason is as a person beyond a diagnosis that I wish we could just ball up into a little digital file and throw it to the care team so that before you walk into the doors of your next medical experience, and it's not the dietitian who has known you for years, but maybe it's a new x-ray tech, but they just get to know the person that they're going to be caring for because they come so much, patients show up with so much more than just a diagnosis on a sheet of paper. They're all of these things. And we have a form on our app that's all about like get to know my child's personality, about sensory needs and all of these things. But this is like the glue that really creates who Mason is all of these different parts of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any other stories or resources or things that you were hoping to share or want to share where people can follow along with you and learn more about HCU?
I recommend that people who want to know more about HCU would just follow along with HCU Network America, which is HCU underscore network underscore America on Instagram, and also Canadian.pku, which is our CanPKU group in Canada, which covers off lots of metabolic disorders with similar treatments. You can learn lots there and find out about what kind of things we're doing and what kind of events are happening, and really good resources on the websites as well for both of those groups.
Amazing. Well, thank you so, so much, Melanie. I appreciate your time today and sharing a little bit about HCU and your family. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
As a parent, you want to be there for your child, especially when it comes to their health. But healthcare can be overwhelming and confusing. The good news is child life specialists are experts who help families navigate these challenges. But often our support is only in hospitals. So imagine if you had access to these valuable tools and resources all the time. You would be able to understand medical procedures, explain them to your child, and help them feel less anxious, which also makes you probably feel less anxious. So when your child visits the doctor, has surgery, or has a medical procedure, having the right information and support can make all the difference. You, the parent, can be prepared to answer their questions, calm their fears, and advocate for their needs. Child Life Specialist tools are ready to be in your hands right now through our app Support Spot. All you have to do is go to the iOS or Android store, type in Support Spot. We are giving all of our listeners on this podcast access to the app for just $19.99 for an entire year. You are going to have, I'm not kidding, 7 years worth of resources and support and information that we have been building at Child Life on Call at your fingertips. With these tools in your pocket, you can transform the way your family experiences medical care. Parents, you deserve to be informed and feel confident in your child's healthcare journey. And by having access to Support Spot, you can ensure that your child feels supported and understood no matter what medical challenges come your way. Head to the link in the show notes or go to your app store, type in Support Spot to download it today. For those of you who are joining us today, I am not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I am a child life specialist. And the suggestions and tips and resources that I talk about with parents on this podcast may be great for you and they may not be right for you. So the most important person you can talk to about getting support is your care team, your doctor who knows your story and your child's story. So regardless of maybe what I mention or what other families mention here, we're not licensed therapists, we're not doctors. We're having a conversation about what the parenting journey has been like. So please keep that in mind as you listen today.